Hello there, as Obi-Wan once said us, or to the droids in the Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. Today in KonsoliFIN podcast we are talking in English once again, because we have a really special guest in our episode. Today your host is me, Niko Lähteenmäki, and also Tarja Porkka-Kontturi.
Hi there.
And the very special guest is David B. Fox from Lucasfilm, and welcome to our show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, first of all,
it's so great to have you.
Yeah, really great to have you here, and I'm really honored to be talking to you, man. You have been like in the gaming since the 80s, and you're the person that was behind Maniac Mansion and Zak McKracken and all those kind of stuff. But yeah, basically, David, how are you doing at the moment?
I'm doing pretty good. As long as we don't talk politics, I'm in a good mood. But everything else is fine.
Good to hear. Thank you. How about Tarja? Everything okay in the northern Finland?
Well, I guess I could follow up with that, saying also that because we aren't talking politics, I'm doing fine. Like, it's dark. It's October in northern Finland, so like considering that, I'm doing actually great.
Yeah, I love this time of year. I love the autumn, but after the leaves have fallen, then it's become bit too dark here in Finland. But same for me. Besides the politics, I'm doing quite well also. So
yeah, I guess that's kind of like the global consensus at the moment.
Yeah. That's correct. Yeah, so yeah, let's go on with the episode. David, for those who might not know your background, can you take us back to the beginning? How did you first get into game development, and what led you to Lucasfilm Games?
Well, when I look back at it, there seems like there's a series of amazing coincidences or serendipities that got me into that position at Lucasfilm Games at the beginning. The first one has to be that we already lived in Marin County, which was the county where Lucasfilm was based. And we were here when Star Wars came out in 1977. And same year, my wife and I, Annie, opened a public access microcomputer center where it was nonprofit. It was set up so kids and adults come in and either play on computers or learn programming. And we started with 10 computers, eventually had like 40 something computers that we would take to schools, that people would come make the birthday parties. And one of the things we did was get a bunch of games from the early game publishers. They would give them to us and we would review them, put the reviews in Creative Computing magazine. And I got to do some ports there was a company called Adventure International, Scott Adams, who had these great text adventures that I loved. Just something about the story game was really compelling to me. So I got to look inside the code and convert them from the TRS-80 version of Microsoft Basic to AppleSoft. And in the process, got to see how I did it, the logic, and it was just, it's a great way to immerse yourself in someone else's finished, polished game and learn how they did it. And also when I was at the center, a friend of mine, Mitch Waite, who was already a computer book author, had asked me to co-author a couple of books with him. The first one was Pascal Primer, and the second one was Computer Animation Primer. And that book was kind of divided into two parts, where the first part was talking about the state of the art of computer animation, like what's being done in commercials or advertising or films. And for part of that research, I had heard about the Lucasfilm Computer Division, which was like 10 minutes from my house, half an hour, 20 minutes from my house. So I contacted them. I said, sure, come on down. So I went down there, probably this would have been the spring of 1981, and got to know the people, interviewed them, saw some great work that they were doing. Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, the Genesis effect, where you're terraforming a planet or moon. And hung out with some of them at SIGGRAPH, the next computer graphics conference, which is a month or two later. And it was just, a nice connection. And the truth is, after I saw Star Wars, I remember driving home and having to keep on taking my foot off of the accelerator, because I felt like I was trying to be in an X-wing flying, down the streets of San Francisco. And I said, no, wait, slow down. You're not doing that. So there was always this feeling like I wanted to be in that universe somehow. And I knew it was not a real universe, but the next best thing would have been to work for the company that made it. But I also knew that there was nothing, I had no abilities or talents or experience that would connect with anything that they were doing. So kind of gave up, but decided to stay in Marin County anyway, rather than move away, which we were thinking of doing at one point. And around the time the book, I finished writing the draft, I guess the final draft of the book, which is about a year later, one of the members of our computer center, a guy named Gary Leo, who worked at ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, he said, hey, did you hear they're starting a games group at Lucasfilm? And it's like, whoa, wait a second. So games group, finally there's something that they were doing that I could be a part of, possibly. Still a huge long shot, since I had no professional or I'd never worked for a game company really. I couldn't really say, here's all the games I completed. Only just one I completed, but it just seemed like a long shot. But I called them up anyway, and they just hired Peter Langston to be the general manager. I guess at that point it was probably just the director of the group. And he was going to start in 3 weeks, and I was told that he would contact me for an interview when he did. And that's what happened. I got an interview. I brought my manuscript. And another serendipity was that, since the second part of my book was how to do computer animation, computer graphics on the Atari 800 and 400 computers, it turned out that Atari had given Lucasfilm $1 million to help start this new game. With the idea that they would get first right of refusal for any games that we did. And of course, that meant we had to do the games for the Atari first. Atari 5200 and 800, 400 are all the same chipset. And so I said, here's my book, shows I know how to do this stuff. And the other weird thing was that Peter was really and the whole computer division was really much more of a research group. They weren't doing film production really. They're doing some experimental stuff. A couple of things that they got asked to do, like that Star Trek sequence. So Peter wanted to run it as a research group, and he was looking for people who had done stuff with games but hadn't worked for a game company. And
that's a little.
So that what I thought was a negative was actually a plus, because he didn't want us to have preconceived notions on how to create games. We kind of wanted to reinvent the whole process from a computer sciencey point of view, using the available high-end systems we had, like Vector, Evans and Sutherland vector graphics, CRTs or computer systems that were, I think that was the one that was used for like the computer simulation for the first Star Wars movie, like going through the trench with wireframe. They were using that system.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. So everything just lined up, and I got the job. It took about another two or 3 months of waiting until they were ready to actually bring people on. But I ended up being the first outside person other than Peter that was hired, and really the third person in the group after Peter and after Rapur, who moved over from doing a laser film printer project into doing games. He thought he'd be more interested in doing that. So he was already in the company.
Okay.
So
interesting.
that was, September 1982 was when I started. And I think that answers the question. How did I start?
Yeah.
So I got there. I didn't believe it. I was huge imposter syndrome going on there. Like I knew that at some point they'd say, well, why do we hire this guy? He doesn't know anything really about this kind of game. And how could he ever do a game on the level of a Star Wars movie for this company that's famous for doing Star Wars? So I was kind of faking it, I felt, and just jumped in and started writing. I think one of the first things I did was like wrote this position paper that talked about what I envisioned we would be able to do at Lucasfilm compared to what the films did. And it was kind of cathartic. So I kind of got all these feelings and emotions out and talked about how we could do it, and that had to be based on story, and that was really important that we focus more on that, as well as special effects or technical achievements. And I think that was good. It helped to set the tone for the work we were going to do.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. So basically, that instead it ended up going quite well, since you brought to the table like kind of outside the box thinking to the video games branch. So it was
true.
Good.
And I think Peter did
interesting start.
I think for a long time we were hiring people that were kind of on the outside of the industry. I'm thinking back now. There were some people that we hired that had been doing work at Atari, for example. Gary Winnick, who was one of the early hires, who's an artist and animator, was working at Atari. He might have been working there as a contractor.
Yeah.
So we hired him as a contractor to do the animation for my first game, which is Rescue on Fractalus. And he did the running pilot and the Jaggy monster pop-up sequence.
Yeah.
And then we said everyone liked him, so we offered him a full-time position. So he came on full. That was pretty magical. And Peter's ideas, his goal, which we never achieved, was that maybe you could compile a game on one of our Unix-based VAX 750 mini computers, and then push a button and say, okay, output to the Atari 800, okay, output to the Apple II, and have it automatically do the ports to that. And that was naive thinking, because it wasn't taking into consideration how much fine-tuning there was at that time to get every ounce of speed out of computers, and how the differences in how they handle graphics and all those things. So never quite got that, but we did end up using, instead of doing our work directly on the target computers at the time, like using an Atari assembler and doing it there, we did all of our work on our VAX. At Lucasfilm, each of the VAXs, that VAX 750s that we had, were named after a Star Wars planet.
Okay.
So
interesting.
So there was Dagobah, there was a Alderaan, there was a Bespin, I remember, and ours we decided to name Kessel after the Kessel Run, figuring that was going to the illegal spice mines of Kessel. That substance was addictive and theoretically fun, so we figured that would be what we wanted our games to be. So that's the name of our system. Yeah, so each of us had a a CRT on our desks, dem terminal, and we'd connect it to the VAX. We set up a serial port from the VAX to our target machine, so we could do we built a cross assembler in Lisp under Unix on the VAX, so we could edit in Emacs and then have it do a quick compile and send the code to the computer. And I think it was probably way faster. We also had a much better editing system, and obviously backups were automatic. I don't know if we had version control at that point. I don't remember that.
No Atlas. I'm pushing to branches.
Yeah, I don't remember that. But I mean, we did have backups, so if we had to get something, it was possible to ask the IT people to pull back something from a few days ago or something. And that was kind of the way we were doing it. So the other thing we did do, Peter built a simulation of my game, trying out some flight dynamics and some experiments in gameplay on the same Evans and Sutherland wireframe computer, so we could actually fly around. You could do it much faster. Frame rate was way better than what we could do on the Atari. And just try out a few things, see whether it worked, and kind of saw that something that I imagined really was a stretch. It wasn't quite going to work the way that I hoped it would. But so I feel like that experiment kind of went away partly after that. We had the tools, we had the culture from the computer division of trying to be experimenting or doing research stuff. And the other, I think, really important thing is that all of us in the beginning were kind of intimidated by the expectations that we had and what we thought maybe others would have for a games group within Lucasfilm. Like, could we actually, out of the box, do games that were to the games industry that what Star Wars was to the film industry in terms of being successful and engaging and really popular.
Yeah, I could say that you guys did really groundbreaking stuff back at the day, so I would say that you succeeded.
Well, it helped that they said, let's not worry about that. Why don't we just say the first two games you guys are doing are going to be throwaway games, that if they do it more as a research project and see how it works, and if at some point we think that they're viable games, then we could take them through to production, through to publishing. And that helped. That relieved a lot of the pressure and like kind of stage fright, where you're feeling you're performing in front of the world, and say, okay, we don't have to hit a home run, to be totally successful the first time.
Yeah. Just to rule like a blueprint to the future, basically. So everyone has the first time in everything. So basically, just you went on doing a bit better every time, basically. So it was as you mentioned, you laid down like a groundbreaking or like a good frame for the future. So it was really cool. So basically,
just what can I say? One thing which is really important, I think, like. David, you are telling that you had that imposter syndrome, and it's just like to me it feels like David P. Fox had imposter syndrome. How is that? Like, this is how we see now, like after everything you have done, and I think it's really like important and comforting and encouraging for others to hear.
Yeah, that's correct.
That like each of us, like any of us, can feel that way, especially when we are starting out with something new, and when we are like really like have passion towards something and we want it to work out, and then when we get it, we start to be like doubt: is this even real? Do I belong here? And so on. And it was like, I really love how you shared about that like personal experience with those doubts.
I feel like that probably lasted up until the point when we had pretty much finished the first game. And I saw that it was a good game and say, wow, I guess I really am a game designer. I could program now. I can do program. I didn't know 6502 assembly when I joined, so I had to learn that on the job. And it that kind of started easing. I mean, I remember for the first 6 months for sure, like I'd hear someone in the company got fired, not from the games group, but from the computer division. We were part of the computer division still. And I'd have to find out what happened. Like,
Yeah.
what did they do? Is it something that I could have accidentally done myself to end up getting in trouble? And there was that level of paranoia that was underlying the whole thing. Like, they're going to find out that I really shouldn't be here. I don't know enough about what I'm doing. And after I actually proved that we could do it, then that started going away. So yeah,
so
anyone could help.
Yeah, so basically what I want to hear next is that what kind of the atmosphere was there back in the day? Like, was it did it go to the better direction after the first game? And do you remember a moment where you thought that this is something special, that this is going to change games? Basically, you answered that already somewhat, but how about the atmosphere? How was it before or after the first game that you did?
Okay, well, I feel like we knew that was the potential. We knew that Lucasfilm was a magic word that opened a lot of doors. When we were looking for people to hire, the idea of being able to work for the Star Wars company was a huge plus in terms of finding people that we could invite to join. There was already a culture in the computer division I feel like was, like I said, research oriented, a lot of collaborative spirit where people were always talking with each other about how to make things better. I think that carried over to our group, both the research part of it and wanting to get buy-in from everyone else. Like when we hired someone early on, everyone would be interviewing that person to see whether we felt like they would fit the team. Fit the kind of the feeling of support and creativity that I felt like we had in this group, and we knew that both the first two games, Rescue on Fractalus and Ballblazer, were technical breakthroughs, and they were. I think that was really important. I don't know if we felt like other stuff we did afterwards those were like going from zero to that was a huge step. After that, I remember for the next games, we used a lot of the fractal code that was in Rescue on Fractalus.
Yeah.
And they were cool. I don't know if they were, now that everyone had already seen fractals, it wasn't as much of a shock in terms of breakthrough level. And I think the next big breakthrough would probably be, going into doing graphic adventure games. Probably specifically Maniac Mansion. And that was breakthrough in a totally different way. I mean, there was definitely some technical things, but I think for me, the big breakthrough was Ron Gilbert deciding to not hand code it all in 6502 assembly, which is what we did for the first adventure game we did, which I worked on, which was Labyrinth. And it was kind of a painful process where everything had to be hand coded.
I can only imagine.
And Ron started doing that with Maniac Mansion and realized really soon that he'd never be able to do the game that he wanted to. And Chip Morningstar, one of the other people on our team, suggested he try doing it as an interpreter, so that you could write the code in a higher level language that Ron would create that looked very English-like. And then it would compile the code down to P code, which would then run on the target machine. And that freed us up a lot. I could actually write sentences that felt like English, learning a new language, but not, but at a much higher level. and that gave us the ability to have much more complex interactions, and it was kind of multi-threaded. I mean, you could have multiple processes running at the same time when you enter a new scene or new room. So a bunch of stuff was just that, made it a groundbreaking tool, which most people never saw that part of it. They saw the front part of the game. So that was a huge breakthrough. I think the Habitat project I didn't work on that at all, but the first multiplayer graphic environments using a remote server, 300 baud modems, and just like, but they got it to work. And Chip was on that project. So I forgot what the question was. I'm going off on a tangent now.
Yeah, basically the atmosphere in Lucasfilm Games.
Yeah. And I think in terms of when do we know that it was something really special? And I think it was pretty early. I mean, there was hype. Obviously, here's the Star Wars company. Look what they're doing now. I don't know if I believed the hype, but it was really nice to not have that breakthrough, having to break through into the public the way that most companies would. And so we got interviewed a lot. There were a lot of articles that came out early on, and I mean there was I remember going to a consumer electronics show relatively early, like maybe 2 or 3 years in, and someone was looking at our games and just saying how, I think they were looking at Rescue and Ball Blazer that we were showing. And I think the person said, "Oh, these are amazing. I haven't heard of Lucasfilm before. Is there something else that they do? Is there anything else that they're known for?" We laughed. And the first time that someone had thought, was appreciating us for the games, and not that we were, part of a Star Wars company. So it was kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, about the hype, since one thing Lucasfilm Games is remembered by for us is pushing storytelling in games. And how did your team approach weaving narrative into gameplay at a time when most games were pretty abstract in the 80s?
I think it was really, it was just driven by the designers. Like, this was something we wanted to do. We chose to work at a company that was a storytelling company. And so there was always this feeling like everything we do should have some compelling story around it. And no one ever told us that. It wasn't like, you work here, you have to do something that has a story. It was... You
decided yourselves to do it.
Yeah, it was self-selecting. I mean, we were there because that's what we were attracted to. So because we were attracted to that, of course, that's the kind of games we'd want to do. We didn't do a lot of, at least the ones I worked on, we didn't do a lot of really arcadey type games. They were much more, even Rescue had a story wrapped around it, Rescue on Fractalus. And that was always super important.
Yeah, so basically, since in the 80s you had hits like Maniac Mansion and Zak McKracken and Indiana Jones, these games all had such distinct personalities. Like, how did you find the right balance between humor, puzzles, gameplay, and story? Like, this is kind of heavy package regarding that we're living in the 80s and the machines or the technical stuff is like primitive and so on. So how did you find the right balance between these?
That's a good question. I don't know how we found it. I think this, again, came from our personalities. Going to Labyrinth, the movie, since it's based on a film, there were some constraints in terms of the tone and how we had to do it, but we definitely added some funny bits in there and kind of pushed it a little more in that direction. And the fact that we got to brainstorm with Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We had like a week at the very beginning of the project where we went to London and brainstormed with him about how to take a movie and put it, adapt it into a game. And so for me, that was an inspiration in terms of, that it was a given that humor was always going to be a part of it. And I feel like Maniac Mansion, the humor from that really came from Ron and Gary. I mean, they were the ones that came up with the concept, and they wanted to be like a B horror movie, B level horror movie, but very funny and wacky. And I was brought on after the main part of the game was designed, to help do the scripting, to actually code the game. And that was probably the first time I worked on someone else's project. And, just having realized, okay, I'm not the designer. I need to honor the tone and the design that they're doing. And then, it took me a little while. Ron would write some dialogue or some cutscenes, and I would kind of get the hang of what he was going for and try to write in that mode. Just saying, like, whenever someone comes onto a TV series as a writer, they have to match the tone and learn the Bible, the character Bible, and kind of be chameleon-like enough to be able to fit with what's already been laid down. So I didn't find that difficult. I think if I had a huge ego, that would be a problem. There are times I would suggest something that I thought would be good, and Ron would sometimes say yes and sometimes no. And if he said no, he'd have a reason. I'd have to understand it so I could see why I was going in a direction that wasn't what he was looking at. And it was always very clear that he was what I would call the keeper of the vision. On a project. I think you really need to be in agreement of who that is and to be able to meld with that. So that worked really well. I mean, I had an enormous fun working on that project.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so basically regarding the programming and all that, when you got to the project like bit like in the not in the middle basically, but at somewhere there in between the finish line and the starting line. So were there any puzzles or ideas that were particularly controversial or tough to implement but eventually became fan favorites? Do you remember?
I don't know. Are you thinking about Maniac Mansion specifically?
Yeah, since there's also like a Maniac Mansion specifically, because there is differences with the NES version. So I was just wondering that how did it went?
Yeah, not difficult to implement. I think the whole game was difficult to implement, and that was probably because in the original design you had to choose among one person, a group of one person. Dave was always one of your characters, and you had to choose two more from five others, and that meant that the game had to be winnable no matter which combination of characters you chose, and each one had different abilities, so some of the scenarios would change depending on who you did. But that made the game enormously more complex, like geometrically more complex. And I think Ron probably, I think he said at one point that if he'd known how much harder it was going to be, he probably wouldn't have done it that way. But it took, I was on the project for like 6 months, and he was on for another 2 or 3, 4 months after that, trying to make sure that every choice of characters that you had would still be successful, would still work. So that wasn't controversial, but it was difficult. There were things for the NES version. We didn't, I think Douglas Crockford was the one who project led the conversion of that. And I wasn't involved. I just know that he's written up some of the issues that Nintendo had with some of the humor that was kind of wink, like things that they thought were too sexual were, we thought were kind of ridiculous. Like, remove the statue of a naked woman. And, just things that were, being really particular. So there were a bunch of things they had to do to kind of clean it up. But
Yeah.
the one thing which I think they missed was the hamster in the microwave, and that ended up making it through into the first, at least the first rev of the NES product.
Yeah.
And that was probably because in their playtesting it wasn't part of the gameplay. It was more of like an Easter egg.
Yeah.
So they probably just missed that was something you could do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to take credit. That was my idea and my code that did that. So it was my evil
Evil
gleam
side.
in the eye. Yeah.
Yeah.
The dark side of the.
Dark Side of David
Dark Side.
Fox. That's a good title, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, yeah, onward and upward, as they say. As you mentioned, you were part of some really technical leaps, like with Rescue and Fractalus, which simulated a 3D environment years before most others. There was some vector graphics back at the beginning of the 80s, but of course you went beyond with the technology. What were the biggest technical hurdles, and how did your team solve them?
It's really the idea. Could you even conceive of taking a 8-bit computer and have it do these fractals in real time? And I think part of it was, again, serendipity. When I first joined, they didn't have the games group's space ready yet, our offices. So they had me share an office with Lauren Carpenter, and Lauren it was the fractal wizard of the company. He's the one who did the fractal mountain stuff for the Genesis effect, and he and I actually hung out when I was writing the book during that SIGGRAPH and talked a lot, and it seemed like a natural place for me to go. So we already had a relationship from a year earlier, and I really wanted to do a game that captured the feeling of going through the trench in the Star Wars, first person flight, speed, and it had to feel like a visceral, like you were going really fast through something. And at the time, I believe there was a PC version flight simulator that was probably running at about 3 frames per second, and that you never got speed from that. And it was also trying to be a real flight simulator, so you wouldn't have that experience.
Yeah.
So I remember coming up with this, talking to Lauren early on and saying, could you do this? Could you implement fractal landscapes on an Atari? And I mean, he's thinking of like how many hours it would take to render each frame on the VAX systems we had, and I wanted at least 6 or 8 frames per second on an 8-bit computer, which was way less powerful. His first reaction was, no, you couldn't do it. But I think he took it as a challenge and started thinking about it and came up with, he said, actually, I think I have some ideas. So he borrowed a computer when the Atari 800s, took it home, taught himself, 6502 assembly language, and read the hardware manual on how the Atari 800 worked. And in a few days, literally like 3 or 4 days, came back with a working prototype of a flat terrain of fractal mountains that you could move through. There's no flight dynamics yet, just like moving left, right, doing a rotate and going around. And it was running at a like maybe 8 frames per second, pretty fast frame rate. And it's like, wow, okay, we could do it. So that kind of gave me the permission. We actually got him on loan to us part-time for the first 6 months of the project so that he could help tune. And also, when we hired Charlie Kellner, Charlie became like the technical wizard of the game, and he learned how fractals how Lauren's routines worked. He was employee number 7 at Apple Computer and knew the 6502 inside and out, and knew how to squeeze every last ounce of speed out of it through optimization, different tricks. And he also did all the things that turn the game into a game in terms of flight dynamics and cell animation routines, and kind of making it seem like the Atari could play way more sounds simultaneously than it really could, a bunch of other things. So I got to do more of the gameplay coding and the screen, the instrument panels, the launch sequence, all the gameplay tuning, and got to rely on Charlie and Lauren to do all the heavy lifting technically. So I didn't have to worry about that. Probably the biggest challenge was the fact that we only had like 16K of RAM to work with. And I think the game itself had to fit into, I think the first was going to be a ROM version. So it was like a 16K ROM. So it was, ridiculously compact. You can do a lot of extra stuff. So a lot of the things we did for gameplay had to be parameter based, and, little simple things that, like how long would it take for one of the gun emplacements to lock onto you, and changing that value as things got harder. So it got smarter as the game levels progressed. Just a minor tuning a single parameter, so could do a lot more of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So really, how could you get these computers to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So talking about revolutionizing the game engine, since you also made the very famous SCUM game engine, that revolutionized adventure game development. So from your perspective, how did the engine change the creative process, and were there any clever hacks or limitations you turned into strengths within this engine?
Yeah, well, of course, as I said before, I have to give Ron Gilbert full credit for the SCUM engine. He was the one who created it and designed it, came up with the idea. And like I said, having coded on Labyrinth compared to coding for Maniac Mansion with using SCUM was, a huge leap forward in terms of capability. Rather than, you could literally say things like, walk. I think this is like a typical SCUM-like line of code. Be walk, actor, Dave, to object, refrigerator. Wait for actor Dave. And while that was happening, you could be doing other stuff while it was waiting for him to walk across. There was already a walk routine. And it just let us code at a much, much higher level and be able to, felt like writing a script for a movie, more than coding something. So the whole idea of cutscenes, I think that's one of the first games that ever used that. I think Ron coined the term. And that you could have cutscenes, running in, something would trigger an event, and you would cut away to something happening elsewhere in the mansion, and get some story happening, and then do this cutscene, which was non-interactive sequence, then come back to you, something that was happening. So that was a huge story driving mechanism, and writing a cutscene was like writing a movie script, and because you kind of knew what you had to do. You had limited animation at the time. We didn't have a lot of gestures because we didn't have space for them on the disk in memory. But we were able to hacks like I think when I came to Zak, same issue. It's essentially the same engine with a few additions to it. And I wanted an animation of Zak when he was going to mind link with an animal. I wanted an animation of him doing something interesting. So, rather than having to store special animation, I just had him spinning in place, going front, left, back, right, front, left, and doing that really fast, like he was spinning. And then I think we had one animation with his knees bending or something, and then lying flat on the ground.
Mm.
And as opposed to now, you'd probably do the whole thing as a real animation because you have the space to do it.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you make it look good without needing special case animation for it, which you didn't have much of.
Mm. Cool, really, really cool stuff. As you mentioned, you worked with the Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick. Of course, we know that in the 80s you were a great team. Tim Schafer, I believe, joined Lucasfilm or LucasArts in '89. So did you have time to work with him as well?
I never worked with him on a project. During that year, this is after we finished Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Our group had grown from a few people to 15 people. I think we were around 15 when we moved from downtown San Rafael to Skywalker Ranch. And then while we were at the ranch, we continued to grow. And I think we were up to 60 people. And I think we had to leave the ranch because we were overfilling our space there. We didn't have any space to expand. So we went back into downtown San Rafael. And around that time, Steve Arnold, who is the general manager of our division now, asked me to take on the role of director of operations, which meant kind of being in management as opposed to being a game developer. And I wasn't real keen to do that, but he held this carrot for me. He says, this price, if you do this for a year, then I will make sure that we can do a location-based entertainment project afterwards, which is really what I was wanting to do the whole time. I didn't especially want to be doing home games. I wanted to be doing something more like a Disneyland level immersive experiences, interactive. So with that promise, I said, okay, I'll do it. And one of the first things we had to do was hire more junior programmers to learn the SCUM system to be able to do more adventure games. And so I was responsible for going through the resumes, writing up the ask, what would the job description be? And I was looking specifically for people with some programming experience, fresh out of college probably, that had an irreverent sense of humor. And you can't really put that into the job description as much, but I was looking for that in terms of how they presented themselves and how they did their applications. And through that process, I'm sorry, my throat is...
Yeah, no worries. We can take it.
Through that process, we found both Tim Schafer and Dave Grossman. And so I feel like I screened for them and found them, and the process was still people that I liked as potential employees. We would then have the rest of the game designers interview them as well. And both Tim and Dave were brought on, and we did this thing called Scum University, we call it Scum U, where Ron would teach. I think we had a group of 4 people in the first group, teach them how to write in Scum, and he's watching them and he could see that both Tim and Dave were showed some creativity maybe beyond some of the others, in a way where he really wanted them. He wanted to choose them to work with him on the next game he did, which was The Secret of Monkey Island. So that's how they ended up on that project.
Yeah.
There's actually a story that Tim tells, and that I've told before, that when I was interviewing him, I asked him if he had ever played any of our games. And he said, oh yeah, loved your games. I really liked Ball Blaster. And Ball Blaster was the pirated version name of Ballblazer, which was one of our games. I said, "Oh, you played the pirate version, huh?" And he was like, this. I'm sure this was over the phone. He tells a different story, but I could feel him like turning red in embarrassment and like kind of stuttering. And he was convinced that he had just blown the interview by saying that. And but no, I was needling him more. I was trying to see how he'd respond to being confronted with that, but I wasn't. I hadn't decided against it. I knew a lot of people that was their first experience playing our games, because it was pirated before the final names were applied to the game.
So can we thank you that he's still going strong with Double Fine and, for example, with Psychonauts 2 and all that?
Well, I can't take credit for anything that he's done after I hired him, but
you found
maybe
him.
You can give me credit for the discovery. Yeah, it's like the star discovery.
Yeah.
When he gets awards, he always thanks me for having hired him way back then as a young man, fresh out of college, I think.
Nice.
And
yes.
he's such a cool person as well. So empathic and thoughtful.
Yeah, I've never met
like
him.
You, David.
I've never met him, but it would be nice to meet him someday because he is a creative person, to say the least.
Yeah.
So, okay, time flies, but I have to ask, since we're talking about Lucasfilm here, did you ever meet George Lucas? How hands-on was he with the projects that you done, and any memorable interactions with him?
Yeah, well, I'd say that George was not really a game player. I don't believe he started the games group because he wanted to have his own games group. I think he saw in the same way that he started the computer division, knowing that computers would end up being the way of doing special effects and making movies in the future. He wanted to start that research early on and start having people who knew how to do it. I think he saw the same intersection with games, and games becoming more and more film-like in their presentation, and he wanted to have that technology inside the company, so we nurture it. So the biggest interaction. I mean, there's one interaction. The first interaction with him was a group of us were walking back from lunch early on. I think I was maybe in the first year and a half I was there. And I was looking across this empty field, and I see this guy walking, and my thought was, hey, that guy looks a little bit like George Lucas. And he's probably, maybe 100 yards away, 100 meters away. And he saw us looking at him, and he waved. And at that point we said, holy shit, that is George Lucas. And we all kind of like, oh, whoa. So that was my first experience with him. We didn't see him a lot, but when we did, he was always, he'd see us looking, he'd wave, and but there was this feeling like you don't go up to talk to him. It was, he felt like a very private person. We could feel that vibe, and a nod or a wave was fine, but don't go up to him and ask for an autograph or something like that. That'd be ridiculous. So I think it was about 6 or 8 months after we started working on the first 2 games, he came in for a sit down to play the games with us, and we could demo it to him. And so I had 20 minutes of his time where he played us on Fractalus. He made 2 major contributions to the game during that play test. Um, one was my initial idea was to not have shooting in the game. I was trying to make it a non-violent game where you're just rescuing pilots, and that the way that you destroy or kill the enemy was by getting them to follow you. Then you go down these canyons of mountains and fly really evasively, and they wouldn't be as skilled as you. They'd crash into the mountainside. And when I told him that, I mean, he said, "Where's the fire button?" I said, "Well, this is why." And they said, "Did you make that choice because of to make the gameplay better, or did you make the choice out of a philosophical decision?" And I had to admit that it was a philosophy that I had being nonviolent. He said, "Add a fire button. You have to add a fire button," which he was right. And the other was the idea that when you land and pick up a pilot, that every once in a while, the pilot that you're rescuing turns out to be one of the aliens, and alien come in and try to get into your ship or something. And he wanted to increase the tension, and that transformed the game. We figured out how to do it, where we decided that for the first 8 levels, that never happens. So you have people playing the game for several hours and getting very rote, kind of automatic in terms of how they land, pick up a pilot, and you do all these things automatically. Then all of a sudden, on the 8th level, this monster, what looks like a pilot, except his head is, the pixel for his head is green, and he comes up, and then you see this alien pop up and start smashing the window. And if you don't respond within a few seconds by turning on your shields to fry him, then he smashes through the glass and you die from the exposure to the toxic atmosphere of the planet. From that point on, there's always tension every time a pilot's running towards you. Is this a pilot or not? Is this a real person or is it an alien? And you, even me, knowing exactly what the percentage chance of it being a pilot or an alien is, and knowing all the tells, I would still feel this little spurt of adrenaline every time a pilot was coming, because I had to be really ready to push the right button.
Have to be on your toes from that point on.
I have my finger on the S button for shields and the A button for airlock. A opens the airlock, S opens the shields. How many times did I push the wrong button when it was actually a pilot and fry the pilot? Or, actually, you in the panic, it gets, really tense. So that was probably the main thing. After that, he really didn't look at the games while we were still in production. I think he would come and take a look at some of the ones early on after they were done. And I think part of the reason he wasn't that focused on us is that we weren't doing Star Wars games during the time I was there. And that was primarily because instances where Star Wars had already been committed to other companies early on before we even started our group. So we weren't allowed to do Star Wars games until the early 90s when those licenses had expired. And then I guess they after doing Labyrinth and then Indiana Jones: Last Crusade, they felt that we could actually work the EP of Star Wars. But by then I was gone. So although the first game I did when I was doing that location-based entertainment project was a Star Wars-based game, but he didn't, as far as I know, he never got to see that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, really interesting stuff. So he wasn't that hands-on, but still visited sometimes at the place, and also wanted to contribute, gave at least some contribute to the.
Yeah, really just at one time. I think this changed in the early 2000s when LucasArts was almost only doing Star Wars games. And then he was very hands-on. and maybe to the detriment of production cycle, because he would ask for changes that kind of blew up the story and the production and things that I've read I no direct experience, but I've read stories about how difficult it was on one of the last games that was being produced at LucasArts with him kind of suggesting things, and you realize that his suggestions were often not suggestions. It was like, this is how I want you to do it. Yeah. Or there was no pushback, or it wasn't appropriate to push back on it. So,
okay, interesting.
Yeah, I did no direct experience with that, luckily, but that was what I heard.
Yeah, interesting stuff. So he was a bit later at the hands-on. So, okay, the next question is regarding the bit of a present day. How do you see the legacy of LucasArts games or adventure games living in today's industry? For example, how different it was to make Thimbleweed Park and return to Monkey Island after so many years of the originals, or regarding Monkey Island, the original. Yeah.
Well, that was a huge pleasure to do that. To be able, Ron, both of those projects, Ron was the initiator of them, and I've been in touch with him through the years. I wouldn't say we were socially connected. It was like, we'd see each other and we'd professionally help. Like when I was working on when he was working on a game, sometimes we'd get together for lunch and he'd have me be do a little short play test where he'd have me play the game while he was not saying anything, and have me narrate what my thinking was as I was trying different things. I had him and Noah Faustine over when I was working on my Rube Goldberg game, RubeWorks, in 2012, I think it was. And we brainstormed for about an hour or two about ways I could take the game. And then, so there was a professional connection and total respect on each other's abilities, I believe. So when he and Gary were doing the Kickstarter for Thimbleweed Park, he invited me to take a look at their Kickstarter page before it launched and give feedback. And I gave him feedback, and I also said, hey, if there's the opportunity for me to participate in this, I'd love to do it. And he took a note. When they blew past their initial target of like $350,000 or something, there was a point where he said, okay, we now have the budget where we could bring on more people. And that's what he brought me on, and also Mark Ferrari, to do a lot of the art. And that changed, by having Mark on, that kind of changed the whole look of the game from the original Kickstarter to something more refined, because Mark's ability to work with color and sunsets and things like that made it gorgeous. So that was a lot of fun. I remember the first brainstorming session that I went to with Gary and Ron. I was a little worried because I hadn't really worked on a game with these guys for several decades, and I think it took about maybe 5 or 10 minutes and everything just clicked, and it felt like old times and just felt right. And working on the game was just, like I said, it was a lot of fun. It was all virtual. Everyone was working in their homes, and we connect we use Slack and other online stuff for for meetings and things. So the language, the system that we use, it wasn't Scum. Ron likes game engines. Is to create a new version of a game engine that takes advantage of current technology, but to code in it. So it's like remembering a lot of what I learned way back, having that come back to me. And then for Return to Monkey Island, Oh, well, so before that, I mean, he was talking about this Return to Monkey Island project with Dave Grossman for quite a while before he would tell me about it, because he didn't want to say anything until it was, the deal was signed, until it was real rather than possible.
Yeah.
But he was working on a new version of a new engine that would behave differently in some ways, but still felt similar in terms of syntax. And then COVID hit, and he said, "Hey, would you be interested in working with me on a free game that we could do to the public using this new engine I have?" And we would reuse the assets from Thimbleweed Park, and just do it, for free, volunteering to do it, and then we give it away, kind of for people who were in lockdown from COVID. So I think we worked on it for about a month or so. And that was Dolores. The game was Dolores. It was a free game, and it was a mini adventure in the same universe. I didn't know it, but it turned out that was the engine that we used for Return to Monkey Island. Early version, it was kind of essentially playtesting it. And a few months later is when he was able to finally tell me about the project and invite me on to participate. And of course, I said yes. I mean, I never got to really work on the first two Monkey Island games, and those were, I think, my two favorite games of all the games I played at the time, or even up to present time. I count them as my favorites.
Yeah.
And so for the first one, I was the director of operations. So I was there I got a credit, but it was really, as a support person, I wasn't really working on the game itself. So sometimes people have, look at the credits and say, "Hey, you're credited for this, so could you please sign my Monkey Island box?" And I say, I don't feel comfortable doing that, since I wasn't really on the team to do it. I think in one case I signed the manual next to the place where my name appeared in credits. I felt okay about doing that, but I don't want my name to be on the box.
Okay.
So, warning to everyone: don't ask me to sign Monkey Island stuff.
Now everybody knows.
Everyone knows. Yeah. So, when I knew that Ron had pretty much given up on ever being able to do another one, and
we all were giving up on that, basically. Because,
yeah. So, in fact, early on, when Disney bought Lucasfilm, Tim and me and Ron got together and started talking about strategies where we could try to get our IP back, or have the opportunity to do redo games, and that using some of the games we had done before. And it became clear that we didn't have we weren't big enough to even talk to Disney. You had to have be a multi-million-dollar company to even approach them. And Tim actually made that work by working with Sony. And Sony was the big gorilla that came to Disney and negotiated for him to redo some of the games for PlayStation.
Okay.
But I didn't do that. And I knew Ron wasn't really interested in doing a Monkey Island unless he had complete control and actually had the rights. But so something happened where he was approached by Devolver, and they felt they had the relationship to approach Disney to do this game, and I guess it worked. Everything came together. So when he told me who it was or what the game was, I was in shock, because I had known its history, and the fact that I had now finally this opportunity to actually work in that universe and play, to build something there was just something I couldn't pass up. I mean, never even considered saying no. I didn't care what he was going to pay me for it, and that wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
I would say, "Yep, sign me up. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I can, since Monkey Island is also, us Finns, we all love Monkey Island games, and since even though there was like a Tales from the Monkey Island game from Telltale, I still have given up hope for like after, especially after Disney bought Lucasfilm, because I was wondering that Monkey Island will be like great for anything, like for like a cartoon or like a pirate movie or something like that, but no. Disney was sitting on that, but I was really happy when you guys did finally get the opportunity to do the Return to Monkey Island. So, as we can move forward. Even though I would like to chat for another hour, but I have to unfortunately go forward with this. So, I would like to ask you that. Since people are since the remasters and remakes are like, you know, they are coming like every month. I feel like multiple remasters are released every month. So I have to ask you, since if you had the chance to revisit or expand one of your games today with modern tools, which one would it be?
And why?
Yeah, you dad.
Why would I do it? And why? Well, probably I mean, if I think back of all the games I worked on, there really were only two of them that were from my game ideas. Most of the games I've worked on were either established IPs, like Labyrinth and Last Crusade, Monkey Island, really, or someone else's concept, like Maniac Mansion, Thimbleweed Park, and Monkey Island, Return to Monkey Island. So really, it was Rescue and Zak McKracken. There was, I have fondness for Rescue and Fractalus, but not in the same way they do for Zak McKracken. In fact, I brought this here so I can put it on.
Yeah, really cool.
Oh, love that.
And there's actually there's a fan took the concept of Rescue and Fractalus and created a modern version of it. He's been working on it for like 12 years, and it's a free download. It's a wonderful port, really, to modern computers. He has a version that works for Mac or Windows or Linux, and also PC VR. You can do a VR version as well.
Oh wow!
And he got really close, and then someone pointed it to me, and I offered him. I found the piece of paper a graph paper where I'd written down all the different parameters that changed as you progress through the levels, like what things were adjusted to make it more difficult. Sent that to him. He used that to implement the progression, and he talked to Lauren Carpenter about fractals, and Lauren gave him a couple of tips about how to implement the fractals so they look more like the original game. And it just, I can't give him enough kudos for what he did. It's, if you search for Luke's software and the word Fractalus, you'll find it. And so, strong recommendations. I feel like I don't have to do anything for that game. I would be nice if Lucasfilm said, "Wow, this is great. We're going to give it a full treatment and bring up some of the other issues, the quality of some of the animation, for example." But I know I actually put out a request on social media. I don't know if it ever happened, that Luke was looking for an animator to help him animate the Jaggy Monster pop-up. And the animation for that, because he's not an animator. And I don't know if anyone ever reached out to him, but if anyone listens to this podcast and likes Rescue and Fractalus and happens to be a 3D character animator and would like to volunteer to contribute something to that, then please contact him.
Yeah, I can try to put something to description, cool. So maybe somebody will contact him then after that.
Yeah, I have to go back. I put that a couple of months ago. I have to go back and ask if anyone has connected with him on that.
Yeah.
So I guess it would be Zak in terms of what game would I like to see brought up. And I don't know whether I'd have after seeing what was required to do Return to Monkey Island, watching Ron and the tension, the stress, and having to manage a project like that, I don't think I'd be interested in doing that, but I would be interested in if someone were to do it officially, to be on the creative side of the team, rather than the actual coding part of it. So I probably feel most emotionally connected to that game. When I did it, it was kind of a combination of putting a bunch of things I've always been really interested in from the time I was a kid to an adult, stuff in the area of like New Age philosophy and aliens and psychic phenomenon and Twilight Zone stuff, and is everything that you could think of back then. And it was just really fun that it came together, and also make sure that it was really funny and fun how it all came together. I feel like when you look at it now, it definitely shows its age in a lot of ways.
But it's charming, nevertheless.
The whole philosophy of make sure that like we did in Return to Monkey Island, make sure that you could always complete the game and that there were no dead ends, that you could always win, that you weren't going to find that there was something you forgot to pick up early on in the game, which meant you had to start over. So a lot of the constructs we have, like the cash cards and running out of money and forgetting something and not having something with you and dying, I think there could be more elegant solutions to all of that. Also, fewer mazes. That's one thing that back then people liked them, but at least some people did. That was kind of one of our ways of expanding gameplay time to make it match you're paying about $1 per hour of entertainment. And now we don't need that really. So anyway, a bunch of stuff. It'd be fun to see it.
Yeah. So that is actually correct, because and you weren't the only ones that did mazes in the adventure games. So or even in other games
that you never get out of.
Yeah. Basically,
my first experience playing an adventure game was the Colossal Cave. In the like maybe mid 70s, and the whole thing's a maze really. So that was like a given that you have an adventure game, you have a maze. So
didn't Colossal Cave receive like a remake like a couple of months ago or something like that, or a year ago or something like that?
Yeah, Ken and Roberta Williams, I believe, did the remake.
They're still doing games. That is quite awesome. Also, they weren't active like in many years, but now they all of a sudden they did like Colossal Cave remake. So that's really cool too.
Yeah.
So we are turning or getting closer to finish line. So David, tell us a bit of our listeners that what are you doing currently at the moment? Are there any projects or initiatives you're working on now that you'd like listeners to know about?
Yeah, well, a big thing I've been doing for the last several years is working with my wife, who's a writer, an author, and she had been writing books for kids, mostly self-help, and but she transitioned to doing fiction, and we decided to, our company, Electric Eggplant, which is really just the two of us. It's not like this big, massive company.
It is big company when it's you two.
Well, okay. Not big in terms of numbers of employees.
Big
in social.
Big as in hearts.
Yeah.
Sure.
So she's written, so far she's written 2 novels, and we published them ourselves through Electric Eggplant. And it's a whole new thing, learning how to be an indie publisher. And the part that I don't like is what happens after you finish publishing, like the all the social media stuff we have to do and the promotion, and that kind of never ends. So we're starting to get some more help on doing that, so I don't have to do it myself, getting burned out on doing it.
Yeah.
But her books are wonderful. They've received medals, and they've gotten starred reviews from some of the, like, Kirkus Review and editor's pick from Book Life and Publishers Weekly. And so it's not just my opinion that they're great. They're getting outside validation too, which is really nice. But getting the word out there is really the hard part. So there's that. She's working on her 3rd novel now, but I have a break because she's taking more time to write this one. So it probably won't be out for another couple of years. Then there's the other project. There's a game I did, I can mention this before, the Rube Goldberg game. So Rube Goldberg was a really famous cartoonist and really creative guy in the 1920s, 1940s. It's when he was most popular in the United States, and mostly for comics that he would write that appear in the papers, in the newspapers. And the one he was most known for are these crazy contraptions, these chain reaction machines. And so his name, Rube Goldberg machines, Rube Goldberg has become synonymous with these overly complicated, generally humorous machines. I mean, you see them in Wallace and Gromit cartoon animations. You see them Goonies. There's all sorts of music videos that use them, and I mean, it's really his idea. So I grew up with him with those cartoons, with comics as a kid, and back in 2012, I decided the next project I wanted to do was to do a chain reaction machine game, kind of physics game, but rather than, I kind of wanted to go to the source, and saw that there were some games that were out then for the iPad that said in the style of Rube Goldberg or inspired by him or whatever, but none of them were actually his stuff. So I found the website for rubegoldberg.com at the time, now it's .org, and sent an email and got a call back the next morning from a woman who turned out to be his granddaughter.
Okay. Wow.
And we worked out, I think, how I could do the games, and I wanted to take his original 1-panel comics and use that as the basis for the various levels in the game, where we take these objects that he had on the panel and put them in your inventory like an adventure game. And you had to figure out what they were through hints, and then figure out how to put them into the scene to accomplish the final result, like squeeze orange juice, or carve a turkey, or open a window. Really simple things, but the whole joke is that here you have 8 to 12 steps of things that have to interact, to get really crazy things that would end up with this final step. So we did the game, came out in 2013, and for Unity actually funded it, the development for this, and it came out on Steam and mobile, and it's still out. So in 2019, I went to I guess it's called Oculus Connect at the time, is Facebook's conference to introduce technology. And this is probably, I think they were introducing the first Oculus headset. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I have a game. It was already done in Unity. It was already really a 3D environment. Could I take this and adapt it to being a VR game? So I started more as a proof of concept as an experiment and hired someone to help me with the code, to really do the coding, since I wasn't a Unity coder. And we ended up with a prototype and had it on like in a closed beta. And, you know, the plus was, the good part was that people loved it. And it was workable. You can, you know, reach in with your hand literally and pick up the objects and move them into the scene, and tie string with your finger to connect the objects together. But there were too many, I guess the original bones of the game were showing that fact that it was originally on a 2D screen, and the UI that we had still wasn't fully realized. And I realized I couldn't afford to bring it to fruition. So we ended up, you know, during that period, I also spent 2 years working on Return to Monkey Island, and then a couple of years working with and getting our books published. So it's kind of been a back burner project, and I'm hoping that we could at some point actually bring it to, you know, either find a publisher that takes over the completion of the implementation, or funding, or something. So that you could put this in your show notes. There's a YouTube video I put up showing one of the levels and kind of work in progress. And it's so fun. It is really, but I realize I don't have the capital to take it to completion. I think it's probably a couple hundred, between $100,000 and $200,000 to really bring it to the point where it feels like a polished game.
Yeah, I definitely will do that. Since I'm still looking at the Steam page of Roopworks, the official Rube Goldberg invention game, and it says in the description that that's the first and only official Rube Goldberg puzzle game. So, and it's also well reviewed in Steam. So absolutely, I will do that. So hopefully you will get to do that in the VR form someday. Absolutely.
Try to start crowdfunding some money.
Yeah.
I would be. After watching what Ron went through with Thimbleweed Park, and the amount of energy that he did a great job with a crowdfunded project, there was so much extra work that he had to do to keep everyone going. And also, I don't have the name recognition that he does. Some people know who I am.
But you do have, though. You are so modest and humble.
I would be embarrassed to put out a Kickstarter and then have it fall flat on its face. I've seen that happen with people who were known game designers that were really famous or really well known from the 80s or something, and I don't think I'd want that exposure. So other solutions, David.
You could
and it's hard work, you're right.
Yeah, you could try to write down this, the father of Zak McKracken, and it's looking your help or something like that.
Dark side of David.
Yeah, dark side of the David is also good. Yeah. Okay. Final question before we wrap up. Any Finland-related memories? Have you visited this northern countries here in Europe?
I've been to Finland twice. I was there in 1995. My family and I took a cruise, a Baltic cruise, and that was, you basically go to sleep and you wake up and you're in another country in the area. And we spent a day there. And then I was there in 2004 to give a talk at, when it was a demo conference. There were two that year I did, one in Oslo and one in Helsinki. And one was called Assembly and one was called The Gathering. And I can't remember, I always get mixed up which one was which.
Helsinki does have the Assembly usually, yeah. It might have been Assembly in Helsinki,
yeah. That was a blast. And really, that year was when I found out that people still knew about our games. I mean, I didn't know that they were still being played. Back when we were creating the games, we assumed that they'd have a 2 or 3 year lifespan, and that when the target computer died or went into the garbage pile or whatever, that, and people replaced them with newer machines, that the games would also die. And hadn't considered the idea of a simulator or emulator that people could actually play on other platforms, and was blown away when I went to the first conference and I was shown in 2004 a Nokia a mobile phone playing Zak McKracken, and with a little joystick thing on it. And said, oh no, and learned about Scum VM and all that whole thing. It wasn't tuned into that whole thing. So that was eye-opening. So that whole conference was a fond memory, and just speaking to a large group of people. But I also remember the one place I remember loving was I don't know what it's called. It's the cave church, or the church that looks like it's carved out of rock. Do you know what I'm talking about? Not too far from Helsinki.
Yeah. Are you talking about like Iorbok?
Yeah, I don't
Castle?
know the name of it.
That's the first thing that came to my mind, Iorbok.
Yeah, cave church. Yeah, that's...
And it's not really a church, it's temple.
Yeah.
Like temple of lemmings. What do you call Menningen? No, oh my, it's not Menningen.
Lemming or gremlin maybe. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I have to do some digging regarding that. So
yeah. I think this is it. It's I don't know how to pronounce it. Tempeliakuyo.
Tempelinaukkio. Yeah.
Is that it?
It's like a Lutheran church in Helsinki. Yes, no, it's in Helsinki. Yeah. So yeah, that was.
And just going there, and I think there was a choir or orchestra or something singing at the time, and just sitting there and listening to the music, and the acoustics were amazing. The whole space inside was just very special. So that was an emotional memory that we had.
Yeah. Cool.
2026 coming to northern Finland to visit us, and we heat up sauna, and then we eat some homegrown vegetables and play some Indiana Jones games.
Or Zak
Sounds
McKracken. Yeah. Hopefully you're able to visit Helsinki someday. It will be really, really great. So at least it has been 20 years. So hopefully it'll be soonish.
We've been Annie and I have been going to conferences in Europe for the last number of years, probably since 2018, and love doing that. Spoke at DevCon several times in Cologne.
Yeah.
There's a conference. There's one coming up in Prague in early December, which I've been invited to, and I think we're going to, but I haven't gotten plane tickets from them yet. So until I get that, it's questionable. I think it's GDS Prague, I think it's called. GDC, no, what is it called? Okay. And I'm sure we'll be going back to DevCom again. And basically, if someone invites us to speak at a conference and handles transportation, then we're usually excited to do it if the timing works. So
you gotta make sure that someone invites you in Finland. So
yeah, that would be really. We would love to go back.
Yeah. So this time, I can't even talk anymore. Time flies by so fast that we're clock is turning 9 p.m. in Finland time. So I want to give you a huge thank you to David for you that you were able to come here for a chat. We really appreciate it.
Yes.
And it was really nice to get in touch with your current plans and present day plans as well. And hopefully the promoting regarding the books, Annie's books also goes well, and everything will turn up really well. And And we never stop believing since you did the Return to Monkey Island. So hopefully you are able to do some work with Ron Gilbert again at some point also. So no pressure, of course, but since we are adventure game fans, we always
a lot of pressure.
we always hope for that. So yeah, so
well, he knows I'm available. Next time he's ready to do a project, I would love to do it again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're all done here. So I want to thank our listeners for watching or listening, and yeah, we are getting in the later hours. So I will catch you up in next time. Bye for now.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.